In this video, we are going to be looking at the parts of algebraic expressions. So we're going to be looking at algebraic expressions in a little more in depth. So our essential questions are: what is a term in an algebraic expression? What is a coefficient? What is a constant? And what are like terms? Sometimes algebraic expressions can involve a lot of variables and numbers, and it is helpful to be able to simplify these expressions to make them easier to work with or understand. In order to simplify algebraic expressions, we must understand the parts that make up expressions, and that's what this video is going to cover, is the parts of algebraic expressions, and those would be terms, variables, coefficients, and constants. So we're going to look at each one of those in further detail. So what is a term? The most basic part of an expression is a term. It is the building block of an expression. So a term is any number or variables that are separated by addition or subtraction in an expression. So if we look at this algebraic expression, 3x plus 4 minus h, this expression would have three terms in it because it's separated by addition and subtraction here. So you can think of each one as a building block of the expression, and notice how they're separated by either addition or subtraction. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put boxes around the terms so you can see them a little more clearly. This is the first term in the expression, and then we are adding 4 to it. So that's the second term of the expression, and then we are subtracting h, and that's the third term in the expression. So this expression would have three terms, and they're separated by either addition or subtraction. This 3x is multiplication. That does not separate terms. Only addition and subtraction separate terms. So let's take a look at some examples here and see if we can identify the terms in each expression by putting a box around them. I like to put boxes around my terms in expression because it kind of makes it clear what the terms are and how many terms there are in the expression. So let's start here. 5f plus 9. There are two terms in this expression, and 5f is the first one, and the plus 9 or 9 is the second term in there. And when I put boxes around them, I'm always going to include the operation or the sign in front of the term, and that's going to be important when it comes to simplifying expressions in our next video. Always include the sign or the operation in front of the term. So this one has two terms. Next one, 23 minus 6 plus 12. This is actually a numerical expression, but it still has terms. It has three terms, and the first one is 23, and the next one is 6. I'm going to include the minus sign with the 6. And the third term is the 12, plus 12. So there are three terms in that expression. Next one is 9n. There's only one term in this expression, and that's the 9n. Again, multiplication doesn't separate terms in an expression, only addition and subtraction. Next one, a plus 4b minus 3c plus 8. There are four terms in this expression, and it would be a, and the 4b, I'm going to include the plus sign with the 4b. The 3c is the third term, going to include the minus sign with that. And the 8 is the fourth term, and I'm going to include the plus sign with the 8. So there are four terms in that expression. And then the last one, c plus c plus c plus c. This also has four terms, and this c is the first term. This c is the second term, going to include the operation in front of it, plus c. The third term is c, include the sign in front of it. And the last term is c, include the sign in front of it. So that, again, there are four terms in that expression. So identifying how many terms an expression has is the most basic skill you need to have when you're working with expressions. You need to know how many terms something has, and that's a pretty easy way to find out. Next, what is a coefficient? Some terms in expressions contain variables, and we know what variables are. Those are the letters that represent something that's changing or unknown. These variables are multiplied by a number, and that number is called the coefficient. And a coefficient is the number that's being multiplied by a variable. So let's look at this expression here, 5x plus 7. This expression has two terms, 5x and 7. And only one of the terms contains a variable. So only terms that contain variables have coefficients. So I'm going to look at that one in a little more detail. So I'm going to look at that down here. What is the variable being multiplied? X is being multiplied by 5. So 5 is the coefficient. So we say 5 is the coefficient in that term and x is the variable. So 5 is the coefficient. So whenever a variable is multiplied by a number, that number is called the coefficient. So now we're going to build on what we've learned about terms and coefficients here. We want to draw a box around each term again, but then I want to draw an arrow to any coefficients in the expression. So first I'm going to put my boxes around my terms here. For C, there's only one term in this expression, and it's 4c. Does the term contain a variable? Yes, that means it has a coefficient. What is the coefficient? Well, what's c being multiplied by? C is being multiplied by 4, so 4 is the coefficient. Not 4c, just the 4. 4 is the coefficient, c is the variable. Next expression, 7 plus 9k. This has two terms, 7 and 9k, but only one of them contains a variable. The second term contains a variable, and that's the k. What is k being multiplied by? K is being multiplied by 9, so 9 is the coefficient, k is the variable. And 7 does, that first term does not contain a variable, so it is not a coefficient. We would not say 7 is a coefficient because it's not being multiplied by a variable. It's just a number by itself. Next one, 2t minus 4y. This expression contains two terms, and they both contain variables, so they're both going to have coefficients. In the first term, t is being multiplied by 2, so 2 is the coefficient of the first term. And in the second one, y is being multiplied by 4. 4 is the coefficient of the second term, so that expression has two coefficients. The next one, 5c plus 32 minus 8y. This expression has three terms, and I'm going to put them in boxes, 5z, 32, and 8y. Two of these terms contain variables, so they're going to have coefficients. The first term has a variable, z. Z is being multiplied by 5. 5 is the coefficient. The next term is 32. It does not contain a variable, so it does not have a coefficient. 32 is not a coefficient. And the last term is minus 8y. Y is the variable, and y is being multiplied by 8, so 8 is the coefficient, and y is the variable. And then this last one, this is going to be a little tricky. This has two terms, 2n and m, and so they both contain a coefficient. The first term, n, is being multiplied by 2, so 2 is the coefficient. Now the second term is m. What is m being multiplied by? Now, a lot of students will get this wrong. They'll say m is being multiplied by 0. Well, that's not true. If m was multiplied by 0, it wouldn't even be there because 0 times anything is 0. So m is being multiplied by something, and then students will say, well, maybe it's the plus sign, or maybe it's the n, or they're not really sure what it's being multiplied by. But there is actually a coefficient here. It's just kind of invisible. There is a 1 in front of that m. It's 1m. We just don't put the 1 there when there's only one m. So 1 is the coefficient there, and that is something that we need to remember. So don't forget, if a variable does not have a number in front of it, the coefficient is 1. Okay, the coefficient is 1. Every variable has a coefficient, and if there's not a number there, the coefficient is 1. So that's coefficients. Next, what is a constant? Well, some of those terms that we looked at didn't have a variable in them. They're just regular numbers, and we call these terms constants. So when you have a term that doesn't contain a variable, that is called a constant. It's just a regular number. So a constant is any term that does not contain a variable. It's just a number. So again, if we look at this 5x plus 7, this has two terms, and the first term contains a variable, so it has a coefficient. And the second term does not contain a variable. It is just a regular number, so that is considered a constant. So the 7 is a constant, the 5 is a coefficient, the x is a variable, and there are two terms in this expression. So lots of parts and pieces to algebraic and numerical expressions, and it's important that you know these terms and how they're used. So again, we're going to apply that. We're going to put a box around each term. We've done that every time, but now we're going to draw a star under each constant. So we're identifying all the parts and pieces of these expressions. So the first expression here, negative 9c plus 4, this has two terms, negative 9c and 4, and then we're going to put a star under any constants. The -9 is a coefficient because it's being multiplied by a variable, and the 4 does not have a variable in it, so that's a constant. The 4 is a constant in that expression. Next one, 7 plus 6v minus 9. There are 3 terms in this expression. The middle term contains a variable, so that's not going to be a constant. The first term does not contain a variable, so that's a constant. The 7 is a constant, and the 9 is a constant. It does not contain a variable. The next one, g plus h, there are 2 terms in this expression, g and h, and they both contain variables, so there are actually no constants in this expression at all. It just contains variables. The next one, 3 plus 5 minus 9, this is a numerical expression. This has 3 terms, 3, 5, and 9, and none of the terms contain variables, so these are actually all constants. So everything in that expression is a constant. And then the last one, we've got a lot of terms here. We've got 5, 6t, p, 4, 7, and 8x. The first term does not contain a variable. That's a constant. The second term has a variable in it, t, that is not a constant. The next one, p, that is a variable. That is not a constant. The next one, 4, that does not contain a variable. That's a constant. The next one, minus 7, the 7 does not have a variable. That is a constant. And the last one, 8x, that term contains a variable. That is not a constant. So identifying constants are just your regular numbers there. So those are all of the parts and pieces of an algebraic expressions. We have terms, we've got variables, coefficients, and constants. And then lastly, we want to talk about like terms. So there are special types of terms, and some of these terms fit together because they are the same kind of term. So we call these like terms because they are alike in some way. Now they have to be alike in a very specific way. So like terms are 2 or more terms that either have the same variable or they are constants. So all the terms that have the same variable are like terms, and all the terms that are constants are like terms with each other. So we're kind of putting the terms together in the groups that they belong in. So if we look at this expression here, I've already got it boxed up. 5 plus 3x plus 4y minus x plus 17. There are 5 terms in this expression, and some of them are like terms. So these terms here, the 5 and the 17, these are both constants. So they are like terms. They belong together. And then we have the 3x and the x, they belong together because they both contain an x in their terms. And then the 4y, that doesn't match with anything, so it's kind of by itself. It doesn't have any like terms in the expression. So the last thing we want to be able to do is identify like terms in any algebraic expression. So again, we're going to draw boxes around our terms, and we're going to connect like terms with arrows. So this first expression, 4 plus 12y minus 8 plus x plus 9y, has quite a few terms. One, whoops, that y goes with it. 12y, 8x, and 9y. So now we need to look and see, do any of these terms match or belong together? Are there any terms that have the same variable, or do we have any constants that go together? So this first term is a constant, so it'll go with any other constants as well. And we can see right here we have another constant here. So the 4 and the 8 are like terms. They belong together. And then the next term contains a y. So any other term that contains a y will be a like term with that term. And this last term here contains a y. So those are like terms. And then all we have left is this x, and it doesn't match anything. So it is not like terms with any other terms. Next one, 12w plus 19 minus z plus 8. This expression has 4 terms, and we need to see if any of them are like terms. No other terms contain a w, so the 12w doesn't have any terms that are like terms. The 19 is a constant, so it is like terms with the other constant in this expression. And then the third term has a z in it. There are no other terms that have a z in it, so it is not like terms with anything else. So we only have two terms that are like terms in that expression. Next one, 5 plus 8 plus 19. There are three terms in this expression, and all of them are constants. So all of them actually belong together. So all three are like terms. They all go together. They're all the same type of term. And then the last one, 4a plus 28b minus 7c plus 4. This has four terms. There are no terms that have an a in it besides the first one. No other terms have a b in it. No other terms have a c in it. And no other terms are constants. So actually, this expression has no like terms at all. So that is a possibility. There are no like terms in that expression. So quite a bit of information there. Things we need to know about algebraic expressions: what are terms, what are coefficients, what are variables, what are constants, and what are like terms.